All right, so we have a quorum, so I'm going to begin. It is 7:05. Sergio, letting him in. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and thank everybody who's here. I am Deb Travis, the chair of Community Board 8's Parks and Recreation Committee. I have a few housekeeping items just to kind of get us kicked off. As a community board committee, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. We will be following the agenda that was previously distributed. If we open a topic to general discussion, we ask that if you'd like to speak, that you raise your hand and I will call on you. Our goal is to have a good, robust discussion of all our agenda items. However, if we have a lot of people who would like to speak on any individual topic, you may only get to speak once, so make sure to make it count. If you're not speaking, we ask that you keep yourself muted to prevent background noise like televisions and such from interrupting other people. So if you're on Zoom, to raise your hand, you will select reactions at the bottom of the screen. If you're on the phone, it is *6 to mute, unmute, it toggles, or *9 to raise your hand or lower your hand. So with this in mind, I'm going to start the roll call. Bob Bender.
I'm here.
David Gelman. Didn't see him. Rob Chklowski.
Here.
Ramdot, he is running late, but he's not here yet. I am here. Leona.
Here.
Welcome. And Robert Fanuzzi, Bob Fanuzzi, not here. All right. So Sergio, I think, are there any other Community Board 8 members? I think I saw Sergio. Good to see you. Anybody else who's on Community Board 8? All right, and then any elected officials? Okay. Representatives from agencies. I know Christine Taylor's on the call, and Stephanie Ehrlich.
And Joe.
Oh, and Joe. Didn't forget about you, Joe. And then, oh, KHCC, okay. Where'd you go? Okay. And then I know we have our presenter, Daniel Abram. And anybody else? Committee, board member, elected official, or city agency? Okay. All right, so let's start off with the approval of the minutes of the meeting of December 22nd. They were distributed to the committee members ahead of the meeting. Does anyone on the committee have any changes? Hearing none, I move to approve the amended minutes by unanimous consent. I'm going to start off with the chair's report. So first up, the Croton Filtration Monitoring Committee. They will have an upcoming meeting of the Croton Filtration Monitoring Committee. The DEP will be making a presentation on the current state of their proposed pedestrian bridge in Van Cortlandt Park. The bridge will be partially funded, or was to be partially funded, by DEP money connected to the construction of the filtration plant that's located right off of Jerome Avenue. The meeting will be held on January 31st at 6:30 p.m. via Zoom. Please contact the board office for the link. There will also be an update on the construction at the Mosholu Golf Course and the Mosholu Golf House, the status of their mitigation projects, a report on Croton costs so far, and the Jerome Park Reservoir reconstruction. I wanted to give a thank you to everyone who donated toys to Paul's Playground. Right before the Christmas holiday, the toys were accidentally thrown away by some park staff, and the community's just done a wonderful job of getting those toys replenished. So thank you to everybody who's donated. The playground is looking very well equipped again. I also wanted to let folks know that the Amateur Astronomers Association Observatory in Jerome Park was approved by the Public Design Commission earlier this month. We saw a presentation of this at the last month's committee meeting. If you're interested in it, you can find those minutes on that presentation online. They are now on track for a spring 2023 completion. And then Tibbetts Brook extension of the Putnam Greenway has reached a major milestone. January 18th, Mayor Adams announced the completion of the acquisition of the property along the Major Deegan, where the Putnam Greenway extension will be. The property was purchased for a final price of $11.2 million. When the daylighting project is done, it will not only provide a new park space, but will also create 228 million gallons annually of additional capacity in the sewer system in and around Broadway, and reduce the chance of raw sewage going directly into the Harlem River, which I think we can all agree is a good thing. The next step in the acquisition from CSX is approval by the Federal Surface Transportation Board for use of the former train line as a trail. Construction of the Greenway is expected to begin in 2025. And exciting milestone. So yay on that. And with that, I would love to just introduce Daniel Abram. He is the project manager of research and policy at New Yorkers for Parks. And I invited him to come to the meeting because we are now in budget season. One of the main priorities of the community board is, or one of our main kind of things that we are responsible for, is to identify budget priorities for our community board for both expense and capital. And since we're the Parks Committee, we do that for parks. And New Yorkers for Parks have had an ongoing campaign, and there's two campaigns: 1% for parks and Build Back Faster. So I wanted Daniel to come and just tell us all about it. So Daniel, the floor is yours. Do you want to present something, or did you?
I actually don't have a formal presentation. I didn't have time to put one together, but happy to talk about both of our initiatives right now. Thank you all for having me. If you don't know New Yorkers for Parks, as Deborah just said, we're an independent citywide organization that advocates for quality parks and open spaces for all New Yorkers. We were established over 100 years ago, and we champion equitable development, distribution, and maintenance of open spaces across New York City. And right now, our two biggest focuses at New Yorkers for Parks are capital reform, which is the Build Back Faster that Deborah mentioned, and 1% of the city's expense budget for parks. So part of the capital reform work that we've been doing, we've had made some important strides at the end of last year, working with Councilmember Shekhar Krishnan, who is the Parks Committee Chair and Councilmember for Elmhurst and Jackson Heights. And there were two bills that were put forth: Intro 840 and Intro 841. Intro 840 is meant to be a blueprint bill that requires the Parks Department to find a 25% reduction in their capital process. And Intro 841 is a reporting bill. And so I'll talk about Intro 840 first, the blueprint. So it requires the Parks Department to reduce the average duration of capital projects by 25%. The plan's set to be ready in December 1st of this year, and it should include, and this is from the bill, early completion incentives, standardization of processes, clear timelines, forms, standardization of forms as well, and agency coordination with utility companies. So this bill is really about reducing these long wait times that we have, building comfort stations in parks, securing new benches, repaving, which would be maintenance actually, but putting in new facilities in parks. So that bill has passed, and then in December we should see some progress on that. And And so the original draft of the bill called for this between all agencies, but that seems that will come at a later date. And Parks, fortunately, is the priority for now. The other bill that was put forth, Intro 841, calls on the city to report on Parks capital expenditures to the public. This bill requires a public online capital projects database with locations of projects, when the project was fully allocated, with any addition or subtraction made to the funding allocation, making that clear why there was any addition or subtraction from the funding of the project. And it also includes a requirement for progress data to be published on the Parks Department website, and a description of the reason for any delays or cost overruns. And it will also outline the average time a project takes. So we can kind of get a sense of where there are delays and where there are, opportunities to be a little bit more expeditious about different capital projects that are going on in parks. The other half of the work that we're doing is our advocacy efforts around getting 1% of the city's expense budget for parks. Currently, the Parks Department has 0.6% of the city's budget, 0.6% of the city's budget, $624 million. The other 0.4% would be, would get us to $1 billion for the Parks Department. And that is really just to reach a standard of care that all parks need and deserve. Obviously, some parks like Prospect Park, Central Park, they have conservancies that help fund and perform some of the maintenance work in parks that really supports the Parks Department, so that they're not doing that work by themselves. But not everybody has a volunteer group, a conservancy, a friends of group. And so we're hoping that the 1% will help distribute the maintenance needs evenly across the city. And this also helps free up these volunteer groups, like I see Stephanie here, and I see Jody here as well. You all are doing a lot of the maintenance work. We're hoping that 1% is an opportunity for the Parks Department to pick up that maintenance work, so that these organizations can focus on programming in their parks a bit more. And programming can be limited in the most underserved areas. Right now, for our 1% campaign, we're working on an impact report that will be published in mid-February. And this report will outline what 1% will mean materially for the Parks Department and everyday New Yorkers. This ranges from additional staff in parks, so that the Parks Department is able to have dedicated workers in addressing these issues, parks maintenance issues, or even be able to simply say for a regular park visitor that the bathrooms will be opened on time and clean, and people feel safe and comfortable using the comfort station. And so, capital improvements are always welcome, but we've seen how slow that process can be. So regular maintenance is preferred, and 1% will help us get to the point where we are doing regular maintenance in parks instead of going directly to, needing to replace, things that haven't been maintained for years. Obviously, anything that hasn't been maintained for years will need to be replaced, but anything that's new needs to be maintained. And that is not always happening at all of the parks across the city. So some of the materials we produced in the past include our open space profiles, and I'll actually share that, Deborah, with you all, the open space profile for this community district, which we do these about every 5 years or so. And these outline the community districts with the most and least open space, amounts of open space. And there's tree canopy cover, but I'll show that as well. We do also have a petition for 1% that you can sign, and I can share that with you all after this meeting, and that you all can share with your networks. We've had a great turnout for that, and would love the support of this community board as well on that petition. And then we also run our Playfair Coalition, which is a multi-year advocacy campaign co-founded with DC 37, the Parks Workers Union, and the New York League of Conservation Voters. And we elevate the urgent needs of New York City parks, the New York City park system. We have about 400 or so coalition members made up of parks advocates from every neighborhood. And we're organizing our advocacy efforts for New Yorkers in relation to parks and open space. We do also have a survey that I can share with you all to help kind of guide our advocacy agenda. We'd love to hear from you all. What are the most urgent needs in your parks? I think some people here may have already taken it, but if you haven't taken it, I'm happy to send that around and share that as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. Did you want to show the open space profile, or?
Yes, I will
I
do
can
that.
do that
now.
before we go to questions.
Sure. Oh, there it is.
Or do I
Oh,
need to?
Yeah.
There you go. Grab it
Thank-
fast before.
Thank you. All right, and this is the open space profile for Bronx 8. And so let me back this out a little bit. There we go. So here's just a map of the park itself, but the highlights really are in the data points here, which you can see in this centerpiece here. Bronx 8 ranks 11 out of 59 for the percent of parkland. A lot of that is due to Van Cortlandt Park. 29 out of 59 for residents within a 5-minute walk of a park, 218 child asthma incidences per 10,000 people, and 80.9, which you can also see how that ranks against the rest of the city as well. So you have CD8 here, New York City here, and you can see how all of these categories and data points relate to the rest of the city and really where you rank. You all are actually #1 in tree canopy cover, but again, that's largely due, I think, to Van Cortlandt Park. We probably could take a look at maybe how that tree canopy cover is distributed. As you can see from the map, again, Van Cortlandt Park is here, and we can assume that there are definitely areas within the district that deserve more tree canopy cover and need it. So that's definitely something we can look at in our future reports as well. And I'm going to stop sharing, and I can send this around as well if anybody wants to take a more detailed look at it. And I'll also drop my email in the chat so you guys can reach out to me with any questions.
And then Stephanie, did you have your hand up?
Daniel just said what I was going to ask. I was hoping that you would share it with us because those look like really good numbers.
They are good numbers for this district, but that doesn't mean that, you know, there always more can be done for parks and open space, and happy to be an advocate for you all.
So I think I'm going to take Jody's question from a couple of meetings ago, which I thought was a really good one about your program, which was, you know, how did you come up with 1%? Has there been a need study or to determine, like, how do we know what the right amount of maintenance and care is, the right amount of staffing, the right amount of tools, the right. You know?
So before my time, 1%, before my time at New Yorkers for Parks, 1% was established as what was needed based on a needs study. And I believe right now, and I might be misquoting this, but there are 20,000 work orders backlogged in the Parks Department. And so that 1% is, I think, part of that effort to, you know, if we have just 0.4 more percent, we can actually get to those backlogs. And so it was definitely an evaluation of staffing and an evaluation of parks needs and an evaluation of PEP officers as well. And just kind of taking a look at the park system and seeing that, you know, there's very obviously, again, Prospect Park, Central Park have, you know, the best care and maintenance in a lot of cases. And then you have other very large parks like Van Cortlandt Park that, you know, doesn't necessarily get the same time and attention from the Parks Department.
So in this model, I mean, do you see large parks as requiring a conservancy or a public-private partnership, or is the ideal state that none of the parks need a public-private partnership and they can all function with just the Parks Department running them? Right.
Ideally, they would. We don't ever want to discredit the work that is done by our friends and our volunteer groups. but ideally, you know, those organizations would be able to focus on programming, or, you know, just kind of being able to have fun in the park and not necessarily have to worry about cleaning graffiti, cleaning the bathrooms, you know, and that the Parks Department would be able to, you know, manage what is theirs.
Okay. I see a couple of questions. I'm going to go to the floor for a sec. Bob, what's your question?
Well, I have both a question and a comment. I'll do the comment first, which is the 1% also derives from the fact that when Mayor Adams was running for mayor, he pledged 1% of the budget would go to the Parks Department. And that was based on existing data at the time that determined the amount of money that the Parks Department needed for its maintenance and operations. Unfortunately, after he was elected, he didn't come through with the 1%, but he did pledge that. All 5 borough presidents signed a document asking the mayor to fulfill his 1% pledge. And in fact, this committee and the community board last year passed a resolution urging that the city come through with the 1% that had been pledged for the parks. So I wanted to add that, you know, I'm sure we'd be happy to sign on to the campaign, but in effect, we've already done that a year ago. But the question is, you know, I appreciate all the effort that's being made to reduce the amount of time that it takes for capital projects in the Parks Department, which has been a consistent problem for as long as I can remember. And, you know, much as I appreciate the advocacy and legislation and everything else, the real question for me is what's actually going to change in the Parks Department that's going to make it possible to reduce the amount of time that it takes for capital projects. And I don't know whether you have any insight into that, Mr. Abram, but I'd be interested to know if you do.
Sure. So I think the 2 bills, Intro 840 and 841, are a start in that direction. I think the idea is that transparency will kind of push along these long wait times. But ultimately, what we would like to see is the parks with their own construction authority, kind of circumventing the need to go through the procurement process. We saw some of this during the height of the pandemic, which with quick construction of healthcare facilities and testing centers in the Bronx. So we know it's possible. The authorization to do so just needs to be in the hands of the Parks Department so that they can manage their own projects. I think right now, because, you know, we're very focused on the budget season, we're very focused on the 1%. But once the budget season ends, I think our next call will be for allowing for the Parks Department to manage their own construction projects outside of the procurement process so that they can build faster.
So one of the things I think, though, with the Parks Department is that it's one of the few places in the world where it costs $5 million to build a bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, and still not have toilet paper in it. So not criticizing. So observation, not judgment. Isn't that, that seems like one of the core pieces of the issue. And then the other piece is that all of that $5 million for that comfort station come from different people who will never be in office by the time the comfort station is built. And so because they don't have any kind of standing capital money either, these constant processing of the constant appropriating, reappropriating, tracking of the money seems to add a level of complexity that seems to be a big part of the problem. And what I worry about in just saying to the Parks Department, your forms need to be more standardized, is that it's missing that they instead what they'll do is they'll shorten the window for community feedback. They'll shorten windows for public bidding or redoing bidding and things. A lot of the reason it takes so long is because of actual important work that's been done to make it more transparent and to enforce a certain amount of public engagement. So how do you avoid us losing some of the things that actually makes the parks process better than DEP's process or DOT's process, where we're lucky if we even have a say?
Right. I think I think part of it is the 1% is the hope to push through a lot of those maintenance concerns to begin with, right? You mentioned not having toilet paper in the bathroom of a $5 million comfort station. The hope is that you have toilet paper. And then I think the second part of that is that
Also, just as a correction, it's probably a $400,000 comfort station that we're paying $5 million for.
right. Yeah. Yes. So I think the hope is that that the community aspect is not left behind in giving the Parks Department its ability to manage their own projects. I mean, my expectation would be that the Parks Department would still do and hold community consults, but be able to, again, circumvent DDC and the entire procurement process to be able to, hire their own contractors and move through the process a lot quicker. But I wouldn't say that the community sourcing aspect of it would be forgotten at all. That's not our hope at all.
Because that's been I think that's one of
Yeah.
the issues we've had with the school construction authority is that projects happen very quickly, I think, without a lot of oversight. They just blaze right through them.
Right. And one of our 5 points for park equity is community involvement. So it's definitely in the capital process. Community involvement goes to us hand in hand with building things faster as well.
Jody, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for covering one of my questions so I can get the others in, Deb. I don't necessarily agree that there was an assessment. I've never seen one. I was here at the very beginning of the 1% for Parks campaign in 2001. I formed the Bronx Coalition for Parks and Green Spaces to advocate for that with New Yorkers for Parks, and started one of the first petitions for that. And we basically were sort of under the impression that there was a very brief assessment and 1% was a good campaign slogan number. I would love to see that initial assessment, the data from that. And 2, 22 years ago, we have more complex systems. Regulations have changed. Parks has to do different things now. They're changing all their processes of how they maintain. The pesticide law limits their ability to kill the invasive plants. So that's more manual labor, and standards are higher now. So I'd love to see actual data. And to give credit where credit is due, the mayor only said 1% because of what New Yorkers for Parks and all of the groups that are supporting have been pounding on the table for so long. So that's my thing. 2, Daniel, you actually said words that struck fear into my heart. Construction authority. I pounded Council Member Cohen in 2017 when he spearheaded legislation to create a Parks Construction Authority. I have on my computer the screenshots from the presentation that Commissioner Silva did to the City Council about the process. And a lot of the things that were in there were the fact that council members give, and I listened to all the finance hearings where council members were screaming that they had the picture with the big check, that they gave $1 million for a restroom, but they're out of office, as Deb said. And the answer was, yeah, you gave $1 million, but that doesn't pay for all the sewer connections and all of that. Plus the fact that the clock starts how long a process takes before the money is fully procured. Right. So I think this is a much more complex issue than like, oh, we need to make parks faster. There's all the legals, like the flow chart of all the other city agencies that they have to wait to get approval from is like a quagmire. So is New Yorkers for Parks actually trying to decrease the time on, have no timeline for the other agencies to complete for them? So they just sit there until Parks pesters them. Are you working on trying to streamline those interagency processes to speed Parks's ability to keep moving? That was a long question, I'm sorry. But you
No,
said
of course.
PTA, and now I'm like, you know.
No, of course. So first, let me say, when New Yorkers for Parks was the Parks Council in 2001, we actually recently, Adam Gantz, our executive director, started maybe 3 years ago now. So the organization has had a bit of a change. I think we've gone from maybe like 12 people to now 4 following the pandemic. And we actually just had the New York Historical Society come in to take a look at our archive, because we are looking for that Parks 2001 campaign data, Jody. So I will keep you posted on when we do find that. It's among our archives and it just hasn't been found yet. It's among all of the like pounds of paper that we have. But we are looking for that, and I will absolutely, once we find it, you'll be the first person that I speak to about it. To your question, your second question, I'm sorry, could you just remind me of it again real quick?
Was about the timeline, the start date of
yes.
the timeline. And then my third question was about the streamlining, the shortening that timeline, giving deadlines for the agencies to respond to Parks.
Right. So again, another part of our 5-point equity plan is the director of the public realm, which actually seems like we're going to be possibly getting one soon. And I believe the mayor is supposed to be now hopefully announcing that tomorrow. And the director of the public realm, the way that we view it, is a position that interprets all of the nuance between the agencies to drive along processes for issues in the public realm. And this includes parks, open streets, work with DOT, work with DDC, and the Parks Department. And we're really hoping that the director of the public realm is someone who is a champion of open space, but also is someone who is incredibly knowledgeable of all of these different organizations' timelines and processes, and able to bring them together in a way that is efficient and effective to build back faster. So yes, we are working on, putting forth new legislation that will shorten timelines. That's part of what the 25% reduction bill, Intro 840, is about. And I think the other part of that is the director of the public realm, and making sure that that is someone who is, again, able to kind of bring all of the right people from all of the agencies in the room and figure out the best way to build these spaces faster within, if we don't have a parks construction authority, then we need to have a way to build faster. And we're hoping that the director of the public realm will be able to navigate that process between all of the agencies.
That sounds much better than streamlining forms. So I'm going to suggest your addition campaign. You could have the plate fair and play nice with the city agencies, Deb,
Yeah.
I don't see other hands. So could you indulge me for two more comments?
Yeah, you can make more comments. Yes.
Okay, great. So first of all, do not take away from volunteer groups the ability to help with parks maintenance.
Right.
It's really important to get people out. Stewards of Henry Hudson Park, I co-lead that group with Dan Reynolds, who used to work for the Parks Department. Deb's got her group. I'm a super steward. I just added super steward number 7 that I recruited in this district. We really think it's important for neighborhood people to get their hands on, to understand what it takes to take care of a park and to feel that ownership. programming doesn't build ownership. It gets people to enjoy the parks, but the thing that we do really helps people feel like it's my park, but so please keep that in mind. We would love to be able to add value than to be filling in gaps
Right.
for regular maintenance.
Right.
And then
Go ahead.
go ahead. And then my second thing is, it's fun. You haven't come to Leaf Grunch or Bulbapalooza or In the Park After Dark, all my signature events that multiple parks are starting to roll out. So it is kind of fun. And then the third thing is, really, we're number 1 over the Staten Island Greenbelt in tree canopy.
You may be tied. I'd have to look at their community. board district.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It may be a possibly a 3-way tie with another community district, but I'd have to double check.
Yeah, I think it's Staten Island. There's 3 in there, so 2 of them plus us.
Yeah.
Because we also have special natural area districts. I think
Right.
that's part of why those Staten Island ones and us have that tree canopy, because we have zoning that encourages keeping it.
Right.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
So those are my other comments. Thank you for indulging me. And my last is thank you to New Yorkers for Parks. We were able to put in over 3,000 bulbs. Deb did her own.
Yeah.
Russ Park did additional. Ewan Park did additional. But those 3,000 bulbs that the Friends of Spite and Dival helped share to 16 other groups were all the leftovers that everybody else didn't plan. We consolidated them and shared them with more. So we're really happy to be able to still be part of the Daffodil Project from its very first year all the way through till now. And we really appreciate that you offer this to the community.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for participating. We're going to do it again this year and hope to see you there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I have just one question.
Sure.
I wanted to just, before you go, just about the construction authority idea. Could you just explain a little bit about my understanding of construction authorities is that generally that they were, it's kind of just from reading the Power Broker, right? Is a way of issuing city bonds. So it's a funding source. The way you're describing it seems to be more about having in-house capital teams to some degree. Can you just describe a little bit like how would having a construction authority for the Parks Department specifically kind of improve or speed up the capital process?
Yeah, I think it's about having the Parks Department who is knowledgeable about, partly knowledgeable about what they need. Both if they get 1%, they'll be more knowledgeable about what they need. And being able to look at those projects and say, is this a capital project? Is this a maintenance project? And just being able to make that decision on their own without necessarily outside interference from other agencies or waiting on other agencies to do anything for them. So I think the construction authority is predominantly about autonomy for the Parks Department to be able to make those decisions. Again, without the input of procurement or DDC. I don't know if that answers your question though.
Okay. Well, it sounds like that it would remove outside contractors essentially from the construction process and outside general contractors from the process and bring it in-house essentially.
Right. Yeah.
More like a DEP.
I believe that. Yeah, I believe that's the idea. Yeah. Okay.
All right. And then just, I guess my last question, I don't see any other hands, is just simply, like, as Jody had said, the 1% for Parks campaign has been going on for a while. What makes this year different? Why is it going to be successful this year?
So as Bob said, the mayor has promised 1%. So the way we've kind of interpreted that is 1% within the bounds of his administration in the time that he's in office. So right now, actually, the preliminary budget that's put forward does have a cut. And we have recently put out an op-ed kind of, saying, holding the mayor's feet to the fire and saying, like, this is not the direction we need to be headed in. I believe there were about 60 or so positions that were cut from 60 or so already vacant positions that were cut from the Parks Department. But it's unclear right now. I've heard two different things, but it's unclear whether or not these are previously baseline positions from the previous year, or if they are the existing positions from like before baselining. So we've definitely, we've put out statements about continuing to push the mayor towards 1%. But I think right now it's two things. One, the mayor has promised, and two, there is an awareness of New Yorkers how important the Parks Department is and how important green space and open space is, especially following the pandemic, or following the height of the pandemic. Because, I think everyone has kind of become attuned to their need to be outside and be out in green space. I think we've heard it a lot from elected officials, the importance of green space on mental health, physical health, places for children to be, places for teens to be, and fostering these places as community spaces for our most vulnerable population.
Well, thank you. That's very, very well said. Totally agree. So thank you so much for coming tonight. I think you've really helped us understand a bit more how these two campaigns work. If you can send us the link to the survey and to the petition, I can include it in the minutes. And that way also, if anybody's interested and they can't find it online, can they go to your website and there's a survey and petition there?
The survey is not there. The petition should be there, but I will send you links directly. I actually don't see that I have access to a chat here.
There's no chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I will send an email then, and you'll have my email. And Deborah, I have your email, correct?
Yep.
Okay, great.
And then are you going to be at the Bronx Park Speak Up?
Oh, I do not think so. When is that?
February, Christina?
28th, February 28th.
February 28th.
Right.
Oh, Jody, there you go.
And only half the tables are reserved, even though I'm no longer on the Speak Up Committee.
Jody just knows everything.
Actually,
No,
just
Christina, I'm not coming back.
I wasn't asking you about it's February 25th. It's a Saturday.
25th?
And New Yorkers for Parks, someone from New Yorkers for Parks will be there because you're doing both a presentation and a workshop.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect.
We signed you up during this call, actually, so you're welcome.
It might even be me who's doing it, and it might even be. I'm actually, I didn't say this before, but I am a new Bronx resident. I moved to Throgs Neck in the beginning of December, and happy to be here, and thank you all for having me tonight.
Well, welcome to the borough. And it was great to have you. Thank you so much for all the information. And yes, thank you also larger to New Yorkers for Parks. They just do great work. And the Daffodil Project is like such a huge hit every year and such a beautiful thing every spring. So thank you for all that. Thank you all. Have a good night. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
So next up for us is old business. So I wanted to discuss our kind of outstanding request for a new PEP command. So in November, we had a discussion with the two commanding officers at the Parks Enforcement Patrol in the Bronx. And then we subsequently sent a letter from the committee and from the board to Margaret Nelson, who is the head of the Urban Park Service, requesting a PEP command in Van Cortlandt Park. And the idea is for folks who haven't been on these calls, is that it would be 10 to 12 officers and that they would be stationed in Van Cortlandt Park and in order to address violations of parks rules specifically, which makes it a little bit different than what the 50th precinct does. So then in December, Edwin Rodriguez, who's the deputy commissioner for the Urban Park Service, responded to our request and basically saying that there are mounted patrols in Van Cortlandt Park already, and there are urban park rangers in Van Cortlandt Park already, and so that should be adequate. So we had the Parks Commissioner, Jacinio Ponte, came to our last meeting, and we got some more information from her just about kind of what the staff is and how they're assigned. The Urban Parks Rangers in McCortland Park are educational. They can do peace officer work, but they're primarily, that's not their main scope of what their day is. And then there are mounted officers. I think she said that there are 2 mounted patrols on the mounted officers in Van Cortlandt Park. I later just did some fact checking with her for her office for the resolution, and that she said it was 4. Her office said there were 4, so it's between 2 and 4, and probably 4 people total, but not a lot of people, and that they're mostly already kind of stationed in Van Cortlandt Park. So what we're getting right now is kind of what we got. So so here we are. I thought probably the next best step, well, maybe the first step is to just open it up if there's any questions about kind of where, like what having a dedicated PEP command would do or mean. I think we should continue to pursue it. And my thought was that really the next step would be to do a resolution so that the board would have an opportunity to vote on it, and that then we could provide the language of our resolution to Community Board 7 and to Community Board 12, so that we could kind of act as a united voice around Van Cortlandt Park, assuming that they would be interested. Laura has kind of given me some preliminary, she's had a little bit of some preliminary conversations with them, and it sounded like we're all on the same page. Before I kind of considered it, I did go look at their budget priorities, and they also include more PEP officers, last year as their budget priorities too. I mean, it seems like we're kind of all on the same page. So I want to open that up to the committee just to discussion. I mean, what do you think about putting together a resolution in order to kind of more formalize, to make our request come more formal, and it would need to be approved by the Urban Park Service, but then also by the mayor, and so to include both of them in the resolution. Thoughts? Oops, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. I mean, I think you stated the situation clearly. It is going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah.
We've already been told by the Parks Department that they think that their resources are adequate. I think a lot of park users would disagree with that. There has been an increase in crime in the park. We know that, there are motor vehicles in the park, motorized bikes, motorcycles, et cetera, that are not supposed to be there. And frankly, the worst of it has been on the other side of the park over in Chandler, where they've actually had incidents involving guns, which fortunately has not been the case on the west side of the park. But, the way in which we call attention as a board to issues that are of primary concern is exactly as you propose, through a resolution. So, whatever the odds are for or against, it still is the right thing, I believe, to do as you're suggesting, which is for the committee to pass a resolution and take it to the board. And I hope we can work with 7 and 12, and with 3 community boards pressuring the Parks Department and the elected officials, we stand a better chance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too that it would be one thing if the parks, the commanding officers, or if the parks staff did not think that there was a need for this either. But I do think that the commanding officers, when they came a couple of months ago, made it pretty clear that they were not adequately staffed, that they could do so much more and they could do it so much better if they had more people and if they were better paid. That was kind of what I heard. And that, for all of the Bronx to have 50 people or 49 people for both commands is poor staffing anyway. Like that, if you put an additional command in Van Cortlandt Park, that you're just, you're actually filling in a quadrant of probably what there should be another command, really. for the South Bronx, so.
Yeah, well, I mean,
should-
that's a separate but very related issue, Deb, is that, there just simply are not enough PEP officers.
Mhm.
And the number that we're given is on paper. It's never the actual number, because over the course of a year, there's attrition. The PEP officers, many of them are PEP officers until they can get a position with the fire department or the parks department or the corrections, where
Right.
the pay is better and the benefits are better. So it's, the real problem there is that PEP is simply not given the same level of status, the same level of pay as those other commands are. And so, the number is inadequate to begin with, and it just declines over the course of a year.
Right. Well, and I'm sure as you train people, they don't, they last 9 months or a year and then they leave, and that impacts morale, and it takes time and energy to train people.
Mhm.
So for sure. Unless if there's anybody else who'd like to have a little bit further of a discussion, we can do it. Otherwise, I can go to the resolution so we can kind of read through it. Oh, okay, so I'll do that. All right. There we go. So whereas the 3 community boards surrounding Van Cortlandt Park, Community Board 7, 8, and 12 represent a population of 417,226 people, which is equivalent to 28% of the total Bronx population and is 87.6% Black, Hispanic, or Asian. Whereas the 3 community boards surrounding Van Cortlandt Park, let me bop in. Whereas the 3 community boards surrounding Van Cortlandt Park, Community Board 7, 8, and 12 represent 37% of the 728 violations of Parks Rules 311 complaints in 2022, and have experienced a 55% increase in complaints over 2019 levels, with chronic and escalating drinking, unpermitted large gatherings, homeless encampments, after-hour noise, motorized vehicles in parks, illegal barbecuing, unleashed dogs, double parking, car burnouts and car shows, and other violations of parks rules. Whereas the entire borough of the Bronx currently has 4 mobile Parks Enforcement Patrol PEP commands, consisting of 49 total PEP officers to cover all shifts 7 days a week, and 1 mounted PEP command of 4 officers, and can be complemented by auxiliary officers who patrol 5 days a week from 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Whereas the closest PEP command to Community Board 7, 8, and 12 is the North Bronx Command in Pelham Bay Park, approximately 4 miles and 20 minutes away by car. Whereas Van Cortlandt Park is the 3rd largest park in New York City, with nearly 1,200 acres of public space that is used by nearly 3 million visitors each year, including 20 miles of trails through 600 acres of forest, the Putnam and East Coast Greenways, 8 cricket pitches, 11 soccer fields, 16 baseball fields, 12 tennis courts, 5 playgrounds, 2 public golf courses, 3 basketball areas, 2 gas stations, and 3 public parking lots. Whereas in addition to Van Cortlandt Park, the North Bronx PEP Command must patrol New York City's largest park, Pelham Bay Park, including Orchard Beach, Seton Falls Park, St. James Park, Williamsbridge Oval, and more than 20 other smaller parks with a PEP staff of 3 supervisors and 7 officers over 2 shifts. Whereas a dedicated PEP command of 12 officers stationed in Van Cortlandt Park would reduce response time for 311 reports and improve responsiveness overall, enable officers more time to de-escalate sensitive situations and educate the public on park rules, create a PEP presence on the cross-country trail and nature trails and Putnam Greenway, and allow for additional coverage at smaller parks nearby. Whereas PEP officers stationed in the Bronx have stated that an additional command located in Van Cortlandt Park would drastically reduce response times to high priority 311 reports, allow them to focus existing officers on parks and community boards 5, 6, 10, and 11, which are closer to the existing North Bronx Command, and would allow PEP to coordinate with NYPD and the Yonkers Police on criminal activity in and near Van Cortlandt Park more effectively. Whereas on October 17, 2022, City Council member Eric Dinowitz and Assembly member Jeffrey Dinowitz called on Margaret Nelson, the Deputy Commissioner of the Urban Park Service, to create a PEP command stationed in Van Cortlandt Park. Therefore, be it resolved, the Community Board 8 calls on the New York City Parks and Recreation Urban Park Service and Mayor Adams to formally recognize the need for a PEP command station in Van Cortlandt Park and to develop a plan for a minimum of 12 officers with shifts 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And be it further resolved that Community Board 8 calls on the New York City Parks and Recreation Urban Park Service to review the compensation of the Parks Enforcement Patrol to reduce very high levels of attrition, which leads to open roles, inexperienced officers, and reduced morale. Thoughts? This is for the committee. Any changes or anything you're not comfortable with, or?
Deb, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I don't know if anybody.
No,
else did.
that's fine. We can discuss.
Not to make the resolution longer, it's long, but it's not any longer than it needs to be. There is also a skate park and a handball court in Van Cortlandt.
Mhm.
And I'm told there's a pickleball court, although quite honestly, I've never seen it.
Well, they're really rapscallions over there. So
yeah. But again, I don't know that we need to, list every last facility that there is in Van Cortlandt Park, but I'm just saying if we are going to list them, we might as well be thorough.
Right. So we could do, so it was a skate park.
There's a skate park and there's a handball court. Assuming the reports that have reached me are accurate, a pickleball court. So we can add those. And I did notice just now, although I didn't notice it when I read it, in your first be it resolved clause, it should be formally recognized. You have recognized in the past tense.
Oh, okay. To formally recognize.
Right there. Yep. There you go.
I was getting ahead of myself.
Mhm.
And Bob, I passed the pickleball courts. They do exist.
Okay, there we go.
It's across from Visitation almost.
It's confirmed.
So 8 cricket pitches. This did start to feel a little bit like the 12 Days of Christmas, that there's an opportunity for a song in this particular piece. 8 cricket pitches, 11 soccer fields, 16 baseball fields, 12 tennis courts, 5 playgrounds, and 2 public golf courses, 3 basketball, 2 gas station, a skate park, a handball court, and pickleball court. And 3 public parking lots. Okay. All right. Bob Panizzi. And welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Deb. So first, I'd like to introduce myself as a new member of the Parks Committee. This came about because I had a conflict with my second committee, which was economic development work conflict. So I just received confirmation that I'm allowed to join today. So I hope to do some good. And thank you, Deb, for this resolution. So this covers a multitude of problems, staffing, morale, training, and finally a facility. And I wanted to know about the, first of all, the park's response to staffing requests and needs, because on the face of it, that would be the priority for me. And it sounds like there is not adequate staffing for the park and for the number of cases and the number of activities and the number of population. And if you were to keep the facility as a condition for staffing, or if that's what Parks believes will enable the staffing, I'd really want a clause here that says that the community board at Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, whomever, should be consulted and involved in a siting process, because there is a habit in Van Cortlandt Park and a history of placing facilities and impervious surfaces on parkland of course, we would always like to have people who live by parks rules, and we would like to have a little enforcement personnel as we need, given that we do. I would also not like to make staffing create a larger footprint of city facilities that are already part of the creep within Van Cortlandt Park. So I wanted to know about how integral the physical space is to the clear need for staffing and training, et cetera, whether it's going to be embedded in this resolution. We would also include a clause that says that the siting, the design is a separate issue that should come before this committee at a later time. And this does not constitute a blanket approval for those issues. So I want to hear your thoughts about that, your response to my questions. Thanks.
So just to summarize then, you're asking if the request is for both a physical place for the officers to work out of in addition to the additional officers?
Yeah,
Is that
so
what you-
it would be expense and capital. So
Yeah,
clearly there's need for more staffing and there's attrition in the ranks. Did the request for the facility come along with the request for the staffing from parks? Is this something that this committee, because I'm late to the game, has put together itself as integral?
so the when the request was originally made, it came out of Van Cortlandt Park itself, out of Stephanie Ehrlich and Christina Taylor's kind of office, and Assemblyman Dinowitz and Councilmember Dinowitz, and that and that it is both. There's a need for the staff, but then there's also just a general need for the staff to have a place where they can, change into their uniforms, do paperwork, have Wi-Fi connection, eat lunch, go to the bathroom. And that's actually true for all of the park staff. There's in Van Cortlandt Park, that's pretty routine that you'll see the maintenance and operations folks hang out by the kind of that bathroom room over by 242nd Street. But there's some of the offices are amalgamated, some of the offices are at Renaqua, that they're kind of spread around, and that's the Van Cortlandt Park staff. So with this, because they're peace officers in particular, the commanding officers were pretty clear that they would need a place to go. It's only even 10 or 12 officers covering that many shifts. You're really talking about 3 or 4 people at any given time, and so I think that the siting, that Stephanie and the various, and Frederick were thinking about trying to brainstorm a bit of the possible spaces in Van Cortlandt Park that exist, but that it would also have to be part of probably a capital or expense budget priorities, getting the resources to the command for vehicles, for equipment, all of that stuff.
So Deb, has there been a space utilization analysis that has concluded that a separate build out is required for new staffing? Is there any possibility that this is part of master planning for the parks that is able to maximize existing buildings or has dedicated plans for new buildings for new staff? I think this is so important to make sure that our physical plant within the park is properly and holistically planned for all staff. This is a crisis. Clearly, it's a public enforcement crisis, but I don't want it to drive the space utilization plan within the park.
Well, I think though that I would go the other way. I would think that, if you don't have the staff, you're never going to get the building for the staff, that the Parks Department works on need. I mean, city agencies work on need instead of desire. And so what we know we need is more police officers and more PEP officers.
Yeah, so So could it go to the first? So the first whereas, is it to build or is it to increase?
The first whereas, or I'm sorry, the first, you mean therefore be it resolved?
Yeah,
So the first, therefore, be it resolved is here. It's really just the acknowledgement and recognition by the Urban Park Service and Mayor Adams that they need to have additional, that they need to spend that money to get the additional command, which is the additional officers. Right now,
Need to
they
spend the expense budget or the capital budget for those extra officers, which we
first they
all
need to
agree
acknowledge
is
the need. Once they acknowledge the need, then they need to do the next steps, which is to develop a plan for, and then maybe that's where we have a line about, initiate a study of siting and requirements for, but the language that I used was to develop a plan for a minimum of 12 officers and then establishing a shift of 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because it does seem like they will reduce the shift to almost nothing or to a nominal amount in order to reduce the number of officers they need. So I wanted to be very clear about the kind of coverage we were looking for, because when we had testimony earlier a couple of months ago, the majority of the complaints were coming at night. So from between dusk and dawn is when they were having the worst, the car shows and a lot of unruly behavior, damage, destruction, fights, and stuff like that. A lot of noise.
Yeah, so I'm all on board with
Yeah.
increased funding for more officers.
So I think that the step one is acknowledging that the need, and then the step two
demanding
would
more
be then,
staffing, yes.
yeah.
Acknowledging the need, demanding more staffing, all good. I'm just
Mhm.
not, clear about, whether this is proposing more staffing or
Yes.
whether we're proposing a new park facility.
We're proposing, this is new staffing, but also it's it's a new staffing, but it would also, it implies, there's an implication that it would need the additional, the expenses of the capital cost of whatever building they're going to go into, what the offices would be or whatever. I mean, we could adjust the language about developing a plan for like this. Do you have some language that you would like to propose, Bob?
Well, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the idea of a facility and a staffing. I mean, staffing and then a facility for that staffing in the same single resolution, which is about enforcement. So I know everybody would really love to see a place for the officers to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think
I am uncomfortable with that being included here, just to full disclosure, and I wouldn't vote for it because I think it's a combination of two separate asks. But what I would do is include language that be it further, if wherever you are saying that you are recognize the need for a PEP command station in Van Cortlandt Park, comma, with siting and space utilization plans to be further
I'm just-
developed.
right.
With comma, you see that after that, with
Yeah.
siting and space utilization plans park-wide.
Well, I think that's citing. That's covered in citing, really.
Not quite, because siting space utilization could turn up space that can be used for new personnel that's not currently being used. Space utilization is a inventory of physical space relative to your staff, not
Space.
a proposal for new building. With siting and space utilization planning
Okay.
created in consultation with Community Board 8.
Well. Not sure how that would work. I mean, I've got two hands. Let me take two hands because they may have questions about
Go ahead.
this
Yep,
piece.
yep.
Leona.
Yeah, it's just a very small thing. If we're listing all the facilities, there's also a public track.
Let's see. Cricket, 11 soccer field, 16 baseball. A handball court, pickleball court, public track. Okay. Is it fair to say a public stadium?
Yeah.
Or just a, okay. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Bob Bender?
Yeah, I'm glad that Leona said that. I completely missed it. You know, we have the premier cross-country course in the East Coast in Van Cortlandt Park. And I think we didn't mention it, and I didn't even notice that we didn't mention it.
So is it not, so it's 20 miles of trails through 600 acres of forest?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep piling stuff into this resolution. If, you know, if everybody thinks it's adequate that, you know, we have the mention of the trails, then that's fine with me. You know, I don't want to get too deep into it. I am concerned, however, about getting too detailed about what we're asking for in this resolution. And I think, you know, the more complicated it gets, the easier it is for the Parks Department to come back and say, well, you know, we can't, you know, we can't get into where we're going to site this facility, et cetera, et cetera. You know, what we're really asking for here is more staff. And you can't have more staff in the park. You can't have a dedicated command in the park without having some place for that dedicated command. So it's, as you said earlier, Deb, it's absolutely implied that if we get the staffing, if we have the increased numbers that we're looking for, if we have a dedicated command in Van Cortlandt Park, the Parks Department's going to have to figure out where these people are going to go. And, you know, they're in all likelihood going to adapt some existing facility. But whatever they decide to do, if we actually, you know, by some miracle, get the staffing that we're looking for, I've no doubt that the Parks Department will figure out the logistics from that point on. So I don't want to be telling the Parks Department, you know, in great detail what they should do to enact this resolution. If the resolution goes through and they respond to it, they'll take it from there.
Yep. Yeah. Sergio?
I was going to say, well, Bob just took the words. Bob Bender just took the words right out of my mouth. I think yes, less is more. I think we have to get people on board with the concept and then let the professionals figure out how to get it done this way. I think that's the intention, is to get people on board with the concept of a PEP command. So I agree that being less prescriptive is probably better. Thank you.
No. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree as well, because I think that if you make it too prescriptive, then you don't even know really what they're saying no to. And you want something that is simple enough, which is really what we want as the staff, so that the Community Board 7 and Community Board 12, it's easier for them to also sign on to it and to agree. Joe, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I just went on the parks website, which, just a heads up, it is parts of it are down and have been down since Monday. So not all of the stuff is working, but maybe your long list of everything. I mean, the park, I'm looking, it's got barbecue, bathrooms, cricket fields, fishing, golf course, hiking trails, nature centers, play. I mean, it's a huge list of what's there. Maybe you can lump that all together by type, you know, with dozens of, you know, recreational and fitness facilities, something like that, just to, you know, trails, facilities, you could count up how many total it is, you know, 100 and, you know, whatever.
Right, courses,
yeah.
courts and fields.
Yeah. You know, courts, fields, courts, fields and playgrounds, you know, because that would, courts, fields and other recreational facilities, because they call them facilities. So that might shorten that. And then I just had a question. I was in the original conversation. So would would adding 12 PEP officers to the existing command solve the problem? Or is it the distance? I thought the distance was the problem.
I think it's both, that the distance, if they were closer, then it reduces the response time and gives us full use until 11. And it then like allows, it basically takes the North Bronx command and splits it in half. Like, so that they're both more proximate and there's a full complement just for the Northeast or Northwest Bronx.
Right, so somewhere saying reducing the distance of response time, you know.
I think we have that though.
Distance, I didn't catch distance. I know saying faster, but the faster I thought was implied, improve responsiveness.
Would reduce response time and improve responsiveness overall. Let's see, did it get?
Yeah. So what I'm just saying is, in Cortlandt Park would reduce response.
Oh, it was
Time,
approximately this part right here, approximately 4 miles and 20 minutes away by car. That
Okay,
was-
to me, that doesn't seem far. You know. Okay, no, that was just my comment. And then, and just one typo, because it did jump out at me.
Mhm.
I think it's complement with 2 E's and not an I.
Where is it?
Complemented the whereas where you're right at the 1, 2, 3rd line, and be complemented by auxiliary officers.
Oh, compliment. How's this? It's spelled how? With an E?
Isn't compliment like, oh, we like you, and
Mhm.
and compliment with an E, like.
You're correct, Jody. It should have an
Okay.
E, not an I.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I was about to, Bob, you were going to be my go-to person on that one. So.
I didn't want to be the grammar police.
No, that's good. It's good to be the spelling police. That's so like that would be the PEP equivalent, I think. You're not the grammar police, you're the spelling PEP.
Okay, that was
So just to go back over here, I think we're so Bob, Bob Fanuzzi, do you understand the idea that really we wanted to
So
try to
yeah,
go with this
command may not-
conceptually?
May
Yeah.
not imply a physical space, a new physical space is what you're saying. A command is a unit, and a command is a unit of personnel stationed, which I'm all for. I just don't know if it's also a physical space. I assumed it was a physical space, but command may have the technical meaning of just of a concentrated unit of enforcement agents. That, of course, I'm fine with.
Yeah, I see. It's not a command doesn't mean a building. So it's not like a command station or a command center. It's just the unit of officers or of PEP officers who would coordinate with each other. Like a patrol. Camelia, hand up.
Yeah, no, that's sorry. Just to back up actually what Bob Fanuzzi just said. I mean, it's true. It's not implied at all. I mean, frankly, they can hire 5 people and like rent an apartment on Broadway adjacent to Van Cortlandt, or rent an apartment in Amalgamated. And you see what I'm saying? It's a very there is a difference, and he's right, I believe, to to raise the issue. Do you ask for a house to be built for them with facilities, or do you strictly ask for personnel? So just a suggestion. I don't know. You put further thought into the way you phrase it. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm a little afraid because we could be looking at new construction in the park and saying, well, you asked for it because you wanted a command, and we didn't ask. We're not asking here for new construction.
Correct. They could find a facility, or like, look, NYPD, we had a conversation in land use. What was it, like last year or whatever? Like they just wanted to add a unit, a particular very special unit or to deal with whatever child abuse and domestic whatever,
sexual
and they
crimes, yeah.
rented office space. Like, no, there is no need to add it to the 50th. You see what I'm saying? So, and it's the same with parks. They strictly need like an administrative situation for where people would use facilities, do minor paperwork. But you know, it's not implied at all. So I think Bob Fannuzzi is 100% correct in his you know, trying to determine if you do ask for something to be built, which it all of a sudden becomes a whole other set of issues, or you strictly ask for stuff. So just putting it out there. Thanks, Zeb.
Yeah, no, totally. So are we ready to vote on this resolution? I'd like to call the vote. I'm going to stop sharing. Somebody needs to see language. Okay. All right. So all those opposed to this resolution? Anybody opposed? Okay. Anybody abstaining? All right. So the resolution passes. That's exciting. So we'll get it over to Community Board 7 and 12 and try to get something going there. Can't finish my sentence and write unanimously. I'm going to need more spelling pep. All right. Well, thank you everybody for the vote on that. I think that's going to be at least a good solid next step. So the next thing on the agenda is budget priorities, I believe. Yeah. So here, let me pull up back to screen sharing. So I assembled just kind of a list of what the budget priorities were last year. I thought that would at least be a place to start. This is capital. And I put the agency response. I only put the fiscal year 24 ranking for the things that were in the top 10. This is the board ranking. Because there seemed like there was some kind of maneuvering around a little bit. I didn't have the final version for the committee, but that's fine. So the things that we have from last year, which we can choose to continue to carry on or not to carry on, and add to and reprioritize and the whole thing. But this is where we kind of start from, perhaps. So we've got the redesign and reconstruction of the Bailey Playground. The response from the agency for the fiscal year 24 one was the standard response, which is the Parks Department funds are insufficient for this purpose. We recommend this request be brought to the attention of your council members. This is kind of the normal thing that part of that process for capital funding. The Van Cortlandt Park Bailey Pedestrian Plaza. This one seemed to go to the DOT, excuse me, instead of Parks. And probably because of the Step Street being included in it. So we should just, I think, rewrite some of this language. DOT said this request contains different proposals for locations that are not contiguous. Please resubmit as part of a general area or as individual locations. What I found reviewing all of DOT's responses to our budget priorities were that anything involved Step Streets, they generally just said no. This is not our priority. So Step Streets will have a different kind of struggle. So it's certainly worth it to get the green infrastructure and the pedestrian plaza probably separated out from the Step Street, so that at minimum it's also on the parks agenda, so that we can get the parks agency response for this when we submit it next. Jerome Park Reservoir pedestrian safety lighting. I couldn't find it in the list, the long list that came, the Excel doc that came.
Deb, it's in there.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's in there. The answer is something like, this goes through a different thing and requires other organizations and bids and replacing existing lights.
Right, needs a bid or something, right?
Yeah. Because I had looked at this one like the day after it came out. I'll find it for you and let you know what page it is.
That's in the register you're quoting from, right?
From the community board. Yeah, the community board register.
Okay. Okay, yes, I think I have the register, so I can go back and check, because what you're saying sounds really familiar, but I was going off of the Excel doc that had everything all laid out, and it wasn't on that, so I got thrown right before the meeting. Renovations to Washington's Walk. This is new benches, replacing temporary fence with wrought iron fence, and repair of adjacent sidewalk. The standard parks response, which is you'll need a council member to fund it. Update Fort Independence Park dog run, upgrade the dog run in Fort Independence Park, and improve ADA accessibility, improve shade, and upgrade the drinking fountain around the dog run. This one was interesting. It includes more than one proposal. Funding for part is recommended. So clearly we need to redo some shaping on what this, we need to do some wordsmithing on this. But I'm not quite sure what happened, what the confusion was there. I have to do a little bit of digging. Renovation of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, funding for engineering study to assess and develop a restoration plan of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium. This was one version of the language, and then there was another budget document for fiscal year 24 that had where is it? The older language, I think this is from the year before, renovation of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, particularly restoration of its historic nature, repairs, leaks, and restroom. There we go, fix that. So we'll have to kind of combine those. I believe last year we went to a study just because the work had gotten so extensive that we wanted to see exactly what needed to happen and figure out the funding so we could see how big of a project it was. So we made the ask a little bit smaller so we could kind of work on next steps. Renovation of the restrooms in Van Cortlandt Park, construct a restroom at Broadway and West 251st Street in Van Cortlandt Park adjacent to the parade grounds. So Bob, maybe you saw this already, this project was funded. The scope is now underway.
Sorry, Deb, I was looking at my own document here. Which one are you on at the moment?
This is that the comfort station at 251st Street in Broadway.
Yeah, the councilman funded it.
Yeah, I didn't realize. That's exciting.
Yeah, I forget exactly when the announcement was made or how it was made, but yes, it is funded.
Yeah, the birth of a comfort station is like the birth of a star, you know.
It still has to be built, Deb.
Well, yes, stars are not born in one day, but yeah, no, but it's exciting. So Spuyten-Duyvil Shorefront Park green infrastructure. So this one of our lists has it as green infrastructure, and then one has the reconstruction of the pond wall, which has been funded. I assume Jody's going to know more about that, and if we still need to include the green infrastructure aspect in our list or not. Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, the restoration of the exterior red brick stairway into the Van Cortlandt Park Mansion. The fence, which has the lead on it, that's been funded already. That project is already underway. The restoring the Riverdale Parks Alderbrook stream bed. More study is needed to understand this particular request. So that may be something we need to just get Parks involved with in a little bit earlier. So that this is all buttoned up in time for the capital season. Infrastructure upgrade at the Mosholu Golf House. This is the connection of the sewer at the Mosholu Golf House to over by the Croton filtration plant. We'll be taking up this topic at the Fulton Monitoring Committee meeting in a couple of weeks. Reconstruction of Old Fort 4. This is the playground equipment, basketball courts, benches, green space, stone wall, and fencing of just in Fort 4. Ewan Park erosion control measures in Ewan Park to prevent runoff downhill towards Riverdale Avenue. And then this is the Van Cortlandt Park Stadium thing we talked about in Spuyten-Duyvil. So any questions about kind of the stuff that's here? Clearly there's a couple of things we need to kind of combine or cut. And there's some stuff that's been funded so we can pull off the list. And then I can open the floor if anybody wants to comment or add anything. Bob Bender.
Yeah, I think with the Bailey Avenue entrance to the park, that that particular one,
Yeah.
I think what they're telling us is that's a DOT project. And this probably should be a TNT request rather than a Parks request.
Well, I think that part of it, the
Oh, it is, part of it is Parks. I agree with you. You know, maybe what we really need to do is break it out so
yeah,
that we separate the Parks component from the TNT component.
agreed. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like, and get, so it would require really removing the Step Street from us and putting the Step Street and the TNT part.
Deb, if I remember correctly, that one was a DOT and DPR request. It was a combined one.
It was.
It was like an interagency request. It wasn't just like DPR as a standalone.
Yeah, no, it was, but I think what's happening is that we're kind of getting screwed, pardon the, like, that it's, that these interagency requests don't really work very well with the capital project program, because it just goes to one agency and that agency makes their comment on whether they want to do it or not. So I feel like this would be a much more viable project as a pedestrian plaza and informal entrance to Van Cortlandt Park at Bailey Avenue. Just see that maybe integrates or something or connects.
Deb, I left my hand up because I do have one other on the Fort Independence Dog Run.
Yeah.
I have to say, I love the Parks Department response. Funding for part is recommended.
Right.
But they don't bother to tell us
Tell you which part
is recommended. It's sort of a, it's just classic bureaucracy, you know? It's like, oh yeah, we can do some of that.
And, I'm thinking of a project. Guess which project?
Yeah.
That made me laugh out loud. I had my mic off.
Connecting.
Since nobody has anything to say, can I make a mention of something?
Sure.
What you got in front of us here right now is multi-millions of dollars, sounds like to me, if you put it all together in one buck. And I'm quite narrow-minded, as you know, with Memorial Grove. So although the park is lovely, is gorgeous, I always loved it myself until I found Memorial Grove and became narrow-minded. Since 2012, since the park was reestablished, the Grove was reestablished, there's been talk to replace the crummy pieces of shrubbery that the contractor put in. And it's been quite a while that nothing has been done, even to get rid of the crummy shrubbery. And my idea or ideas back then, in those days when we were speaking, that we would have shrubbery roughly no more than fence height, because you're not taking it out of sight. You want to just lift up the looks of the place. So is there any thought about shrubbery for that grove to follow the fence around?
It's a good question. I mean, it wouldn't be capital. Stephanie, I saw your hand go up. Do you have the answer to this question?
I have the answer to this question.
I'd like to phone a friend.
So Herb, we have formed a partnership and friendship with the folks at Woodlawn Cemetery, and they are actually really interested in helping us with this particular location. So they're gonna, they have interns who are learning about monument restoration. So they're gonna work with the Parks Department to help us keep the monuments, to help us keep the plaques looking good. That's one cohort of interns. The other cohort is landscape oriented, and they're gonna help us with some planting of shrubs. So we're moving it forward. We're gonna make it look beautiful. It won't happen tomorrow, but I think it's gonna start to happen over this, starting in the spring. So we have a meeting set to talk with them next week, actually.
Can I come? Can you tell me where? Maybe I'll try to make it, or is
Well, we're gonna get it started just with some particular logistics, and then when we're picking plants and that sort of stuff, and we do a site meeting, we'll invite you to come join us. Does that work?
I see. Also, during what you just said is also another thing. The contractor that put in the monuments was supposed to be coming back once a year or something in that order. I never seen the contract, and actually clean the stones because they get darkened from environments, a terrible environment that we do have in New York, and just keep it up. Not particularly polish the plaques, because you're not supposed to do that. There's a coating on it to keep it the way they are. But the stones themselves looks almost like a picture frame, and they get blackened from this environment that we have, and they're supposed to clean it periodically. And I don't know, once a year or whatever period of time is required. But that never occurred.
That occurred this year, yeah. Sorry.
I know most of you people that are listening right now don't know even what we are talking about for those days back. It's so many years back already.
But thank you. It sounds like the Memorial Grove is in good hands as far as the shrubberies go and the plaques. So that's good. So we don't have to worry about that here. Ramdad, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I was looking at the language for which one, the dog run.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking maybe I remember the conversation focusing on updating the dog run with improved ADA. So maybe if we change the "and" with improved ADA and improved shade.
I think what they think we're asking is to upgrade the dog run and improve the ADA accessibility for the park instead of for the dog run.
Exactly.
Or
with improved ADA accessibility to the dog run, or make it more specific. Because that's what exactly I was thinking, was they're thinking that we want to improve ADA accessibility entrance to the park, not necessarily just the dog run specifically. Because I remember you saying that the dog run wasn't necessarily ADA accessibility, but the park is.
The park has ADA, yeah, the park is fine, it's just you can't get into the dog run.
So if we maybe change that in a way that emphasizes that we want the ADA improved accessibility to be improved for the dog run, not exactly. Thanks.
You guys are so optimistic. I'm thinking they're like, oh yeah, we'll fix the water fountain. That's the part that, because that's a plumbing thing, That's why I think they're saying is, oh, the fountain, that's a whole separate thing. We'll fix that.
Improve ADA accessibility, upgrade, it's the drinking fountain. It's to make the drinking fountain convert the drinking fountain so it works for dogs. It's add or change. It's like you change the existing drinking fountain so that it's compatible with dogs, so dogs can drink out of it.
Right, but the drinking fountain is outside the dog run. I think that's why they're saying it's two separate things, because one is the dog run and the second is the plumbing in the park.
Right, well, right, or just adding, it's just the drinking fountain part of it, but yeah, it's outside of the dog run. Okay. ADA accessibility and add shade. So maybe it's shade to the Fort Independence dog run and and with better access to drinking water. And then
For
they can,
for dogs.
for dogs.
Is,
And then they
is-
can figure out, then they can decide for themselves as a follow-up item, like they could just change the drinking fountain outside the dog run instead of instead of adding it inside, you know what I mean?
right, yeah.
All we want is just the dogs to stop drinking out of the human drinking fountain.
Never gonna happen. They do it in Henry Hudson Park.
It's pretty gross. I see him do it. I mean, I'm sympathetic, but man, those are some big tongues on that. So improve ADA accessibility for dog owners, just to be clear. Not for the dogs with ADA accessibility issues, for dog owners. And add shade to the Fort Independence dog run with better access to drinking water for dogs. I think that sounds more like one project. Let's see. We'll see what happens. And then, okay, so I'm sure you get this all the time. Khadijah? Ah.
Great
What-
job. Hi, good evening, everybody. It's my first time joining, so I want to make sure I'm on the right track. Would
Yeah,
this be
welcome.
the time to talk about sort of what KCC's ask is of the Parks Department for FY25?
So I don't know what a 525 is, but if you're saying this is the right time to ask for money as a parks budget priority, then yes, totally.
Wonderful, thank you. And so for KHCC, I'm sure most of you know our main building is a parks building.
Mhm.
And we've been quite frankly struggling to raise the capital funding to replace our roof, to replace and repair our roof. Right now we are around the 3 million mark and we need about 5. So we've been working with elected officials to raise that funding with council members, et cetera. But we really need, parks to sort of continue to recognize that this is their building, right? And to recognize the scope of the challenge. It's not a simple job. And it also has to do with the facade of the building as well, needs new pointing and, all of those details. And so for fiscal year 24, like help us out. And then for fiscal year 25, sort of keeping in mind that the facade still needs that pointing, whether or not we continue to inhabit this building, right? Like
Mhm.
whether or not KCC remains in this building for foreseeable future, in order to preserve the building itself, these items need to be addressed. And our hope and goal would be that the Economic Development Corp would be the folks to sort of take the project over, even if they're not the ones like fully funding it, right? Because it is such a huge job. And obviously we want to stay in this building. This is our hub and, we're coming up on 50 years in the building. So we'd really like to continue to run programming. But it does start to get difficult because we are experiencing leaks on days like, when it's raining hard and all of those things.
Right. So so this is fiscal year 25. I think you're totally right that that it's good just to get the ask down and formalize it in the first on-ramp you can to get onto the highway, and then there's ongoing discussions and stuff. So and then we can modify this again next year if we want to adjust it for fiscal year 25, or for 26. but that, so it can kind of, we can move as things get funded. And, you know, so that, so since this is kind of the first time we're asking for the KHCC building, is it it is just money to replace and repair the roof and repoint the facade, or is it kind of like a reconstruction of the building as a whole, or restoration of the historic site? Is it landmarked?
I am not sure if it's landmarked.
It is landmarked.
It is, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Restoration of historic, is it Kingsbridge Heights Community Center? We'll just call it the historic Kingsbridge Heights Community Center.
Yes.
Deb, I apologize to Leona, who I know has had her hand up since before me, but can I speak to this issue for just a minute?
Totally.
Because Laura Spalter, the board chair, and I were at a meeting in December over at KHCC, and there were elected officials or representatives of elected officials from the city council, the assembly, the state senate, the borough president's office, the mayor's office, a congressman's office, and the governor's office. It was really a sort of summit of elected officials, because this is not something that can wait till 2025.
Right.
The conditions at KHCC are really dire, and the building is in disrepair, and they actually have to put up safety sheds at the entrances because of the danger of falling bricks, which gives you some sense of just how bad this is. There was agreement among all the elected officials that this is an urgent situation, it's a crisis, and it needs to be addressed immediately. That doesn't mean that we have the funding in hand, and there are, a couple of complicated bureaucratic issues about what happens if it goes through parks versus what happens if it goes through EDC, the Economic Development Corporation. But all I'm saying is, well, I certainly have no objection to adding it to 2025. The situation there has to be resolved before 2025. So, if we put it on the capital budget request, we should do that with the understanding that there's an effort being made to move this forward to the point where by 2025, it will have to have been resolved, or the building will have to be closed and abandoned. So that's
Thank you,
the
Bob.
nature of the situation right now.
Well,
Yes, absolutely agreed. Sorry, Deborah, and I just want to, maybe clarify sort of where I was going with it. And so for fiscal year 25, our ask is that they maintain the pointing and actually commit to putting capital funds in the building, because they have not, right? Parks has not put any capital funds into the building. And so for 25, it's more about the maintenance, but for 24, Bob is absolutely correct. We're asking and pushing forward that everyone is sort of on the same page around the dire situation around the roof itself. And yeah.
So is it that, so there's the immediate situation, which is the roof and the brick that's falling off. So it's like the local law, probably it's local law, FIPS Cycle 9 like work, right? Local law 11 stuff. Then is it also like, I assume that like there's boilers and windows and gutters and energy efficiency stuff that you're going to need to get to certain city requirements for. I mean, is there a world where we should also just kind of pull the camera back a little bit and say there's a bigger, larger capital project, which is just the full restoration of this building? Is that or energy improvements so that it's fully functional? I mean, what's the state of the boiler or something? I think of like some of those things that have befallen the housing committee where the boiler doesn't get to the list. Like ideally, some of this stuff would have been on this list 5 years ago. So like looking ahead, what are the things that should go on this list for future self, so that, future self is happy with, future Parks Committee is really thrilled with the work we're doing today.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that nitty gritty work that you're talking about has been done by us.
Mhm.
You know, we've sort of tried our hardest to make all of those changes ourselves. When it comes to the big things like boiler and electric and things like that, I think that, you know, we definitely are going to want to look at updating those things in the future. But where they stand right now, I think that we are at a baseline. I wouldn't say that, you know, everything is great and everything is brand new, but I think we're at a baseline, we're functioning. And most of our bigger challenges are with regard to the leaks that are experienced and how that affects the actual space itself, right? Like once, you know, repainting every couple of months, you know, we
Right.
have puddles in spaces that kids are in, right? And that's just not safe. And so a lot of the day-to-day challenges stem from the roof. And so I think, you know, that's why that ask is sort of in the
The first
forefront.
one, right?
Yeah, and then, you know, obviously, you know, once the roof is done, then we can definitely, I think a little further out with regard to like how the spaces are used, especially as we try to like reconfigure and, you know, get more creative. But we definitely want to keep this space as our hub, as our home, you know, as we come up on these 50 years.
So would it be fair to say that to repair and replace the roof or replace and repair, I guess you just well, you both, okay, repair and replace the roof, repoint the facade, and perform a restoration of the interior spaces.
Yeah, like commit to restoration, commit to, you know, because
and restore the interior facilities or like in facilities to good repair. A state of good repair.
Mhm.
Something like that.
Yeah. And Margaret, our ED has a really helpful sort of synopsis of where we are and what the problem, you know, looks like and all of that I know she could share with folks if anyone had any additional questions and, you know, that I couldn't answer for you today.
Oh,
But
no,
Bob
no.
did really, really well around that visit that happened a couple weeks ago.
Well, I'm glad to hear that everybody's putting their heads together to try to figure out how to get that funding. So hopefully they'll be able to, now that we're in budget season, to find it someplace under all the rocks. So that's great. And thank you for coming on the call to add that to the priorities. That's super
Thank you for
important.
having me.
All right, Leona. You were much younger when you started on this committee, and now finally I'm calling on you.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the study for the Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, does that explicitly include the track as well? Or just like the surrounding stadium?
Let's see. Funding for study.
It's just for the stadium, for the building.
It's for the structure.
Because the track itself could also use work.
The track is going to be, it's actually funded separately, and it's going to be taken care of hopefully starting in 2024 is when it's slated to start, but I'll keep you guys apprised if that moves further away. But it's funded and it's going to be a citywide sort of an internal parks capital project.
That's great to hear.
Stephanie, while you're on that topic of the stadium, we've got this language down here about renovation of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, particularly restoration of its historic nature, repairs, leaks, and restrooms. I mean, and maybe Bob, you remember this from last year. I thought we got rid of this language in favor of the study language. Is that not true? We did, right? Ramdot's nodding.
We did, because I think people were fearful that this would lead to the stadium being torn down. Whereas this will be studying of how to restore it, or, you know, something of that nature.
So we can cut this one, right? We're okay with that? Right. Delete. And then Ramdot, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so two things. Back to the KHCC thing, does it make sense to maybe send a letter to DPR and tell them that, hey, and remind them that this is their building, and remind them that the scope of the programming that KHCC does on a daily basis, because they run from programming from pre-K all the way to adult programming. So like you're putting in pretty much, by you not taking ownership or responsibility for this building, you're also putting the lives of these kids at risk if like a falling brick, God forbid, happens to fall from the building and, you know, hit one of the, so does it make sense to like maybe send like a letter and say from this community board to say like, you need to recommit to this building, and, you know, not only in terms of restoring the interior facilities and, you know, continuously fund and maintain the building specifically after, then this is me being optimistic that they will replace and repair the roof, you know?
So Bob, you were the chair when this was originally, I think this was on the agenda in September, right?
I don't recall that it was, we brought it up, yeah, we did bring it up briefly in September, because at that point, we'd become aware that the situation was growing dire.
Yeah.
I should say, Parks is aware that this is their facility, and they did attend the December meeting. They're fully aware of how bad the situation is. It's the same response we get to all of our Parks capital projects. You know, they agree, they like the project and they have no funding for it. So, I don't think we'd be telling Parks anything that they don't already know and don't already acknowledge, Ramdat. You know, they know just how bad the situation is. They were at the meeting, and, you know, they're going to try to work along with the elected officials. But again, you know, Parks doesn't have any money to do any of this. So that was the substance of our conversation back in December.
So Bob, one of the problems seems to be that the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center doesn't really have a long-term lease. Like they're month to month still, correct? Like that they have no ownership, they have no ability to even know that they're going to be in the building long-term enough to put out a loan. Was there discussion about changing those terms?
Right, you're right. They can't get a loan because they have no equity in the building.
Right.
Because they don't own the building. The Parks Department owns the building. And that, you know, we had some conversation about that, and you're getting into complicated details about finance at that point, about whether, you know, the Parks Department can in some way allow an encumbrance on the building.
Right.
So, you know, that really was a dead end in terms of trying to come up with financing. But you're absolutely right. One of the reasons that KHCC cannot raise money using the equity in the building is that they have no equity in the building. So the main way that KHCC is funding is from public funding from elected officials and foundation money, which they actually do a very good job of raising foundation money. But when it gets to, you know, when it gets to something like this, that's beyond their normal operational costs, you know, major renovation, they're totally at a loss. You know, they need help from outside and from elected officials.
Right. Because this seems to be a little bit of a chronic problem. We see this at the golf course as well, like other concessions where there's capital repairs that go undone. And that it's part of, in those cases, they at least have ways of making money that are outside of that wouldn't undermine their own programming, but that still they need to raise money in order to maintain the building, that Parks is essentially putting that burden on them. Yeah. Okay. Ramdat.
Yeah, I had one more thing. Riverdale Playground, near Hudson Manor Terrace. And this is from my students specifically who have told me about this, because I haven't gone to play basketball at that court. The backboards and the nets and the rims need replacement, or some sort of upgrade.
Okay.
And I think that's it.
That really should be an expense item rather than a capital item.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you check with Joe Magneri and Parks, they would tell you that really should be maintenance.
I think Joe's on the call. Joe, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here, Deb. When you say maintenance, I mean, there's a lot of basketball courts there and they are old. I don't think that that's something that we could just like go into our budget and replace. You know what I mean?
Is it an expense item though, or would you say it's capital?
I'm not gonna, I don't know. I have no clue. Whether or not, I mean, I could get back to you tomorrow and let you know for sure whether it's expense or capital. I mean, I think there's gotta be at least 1, 2, 3, 4, like,
I think there's
we're
8.
talking like 12 backwards, 8, so that's
I think there's
16.
I think there's 4 and 4 on each side,
Yeah.
or 5, 4 or 5. I don't remember the exact number.
Doesn't capital go by the total amount, like anything
Total,
over?
I
a
think
certain
it's,
amount of
it's
money?
a-
100, isn't it 100 grand? Isn't
yeah, I
that
thought-
the threshold?
and 5 years, right? Has to last 5 years and cost I thought it was 35,000.
Yeah, I don't know what the price of those are, and I think there's a lot more,
Well, we
I don't
leave
know.
it at capital and then like it seems a bit like it could become capital pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Depending on
And
the state.
not only that, but you got the backboards and then the surface is in bad shape as well,
Right, it needs to be resurfaced. It's
Yeah.
the nets, rims, and the surface.
Yeah.
There is that program that they got involved with in Fort 4, where it was like a nonprofit, like kind of that did basketball courts specifically. And they got new nets and rims out of it, and backboards.
Yeah, so they bought them and we actually installed them.
Yeah. I don't know if that's something that would work here. But something that maybe the kids can like look into. There seems to be a couple of programs like that. All right. One thing I wanted to also raise was the northern border of Van Cortlandt Park. We talked about fence there, or like actually doing a capital project to establish entrances at the northern border of Van Cortlandt Park and put fencing up. Are we all right with that?
I think we have to be specific about the location. You're not talking about on the Broadway side, are you?
No, I'm talking about the northern border. So the Yonkers, where there's kind of like where between Broadway and like Carroll, or even like if you're trying to figure out how to handle what do they call the Jacons or whatever, to make the Putnam Trail more difficult for motorized vehicles, but to actually do more of a proper fence at the northern, a formal fence, at the northern edge. Construct a border fence.
I think that I think that it would be nice if there were going to be fencing, if it would be wrought iron fence.
Agreed. Iron fence. Yeah. Right, iron fence. Wrought is WRU, like that. Wrought iron fence.
You got it.
Oh man. Paid a lot of money for that English degree to be struggling with the words. Right. Construct a border wrought iron fence along the northern edge of Van Cortlandt Park with entrances with the gated entrances or something that will to limit unauthorized vehicles. The pathways, something like that. first draft. We can,
Mhm.
we can sit with it for a month and then go back and fix it. So we got that. ADA access to the Northwest Forest was the other thing that came out of that discussion. I don't know if that was something, it was really just like having some sort of simple, I think, mat or entrance to the pathway, right? Making that the entrance to the Northwest Forest a little bit easier to find. Jody, you've got your hand up. Is that about the ADA access to the Northwest Forest or what we're discussing, or is it a
No.
new thing?
That's been up for a while since you were on the stadium.
Oh, geez, I'm sorry. Okay. What do you,
so
yeah,
no, it's
jump in.
okay. I went back to the register. So the one that's in the register is the phrasing that says historic.
Okay.
Not the other one, because we use the word renovation to prevent them from tearing it down. So that's
Okay.
on, if you want to make a note, it's on page 135, the numbered page 135.
Okay.
And it's the one that talks about the leaks in the roof and the
Okay.
renovation of it. And then I was just wondering about we've been talking about a PEP command.
Yeah, add
Maybe
it.
we should put that in so is there PEP in this one? I didn't see if we got to it yet,
Nope, we don't have it yet.
because there is one on the register.
There's additional, that's the expense item for more
Right.
PEPs. Yeah. But this is the capital.
Yeah, so
um,
there's in the expense one, we did put PEP, so maybe that's where we make it clear that we want those PEP to be the command.
Okay, here's the
'Cause it said-
expense.
Because parks, it says the expense report says that parks is open to more PEP, but so that's and then if Bob was concerned about a facility, we just don't write facility in, we write upgrade, funding to repurpose or something,
Right.
in the capital one.
Well, they need things like cars or bikes or however it is they would get along. So there's equipment like, computers and phones and.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
I guess that's expense.
Well, no, is it vehicles is capital.
Vehicles is capital.
Right. So that's what I was saying, since that expense thing in general was for PEP, maybe we put in for the expense stuff for those 12 new officers. The capital stuff, the purchases for those officers.
So it's vehicles or capital?
I think vehicles are capital, right?
I'm sure vehicles are capital. Well, although the John Deere tractor with the cutting unit, the crew cab pickup, and the garbage truck are all over here, under expense.
Oh, okay.
So. So we can add vehicles. PEP.
Okay. Just sorry, I know I jumped, but it's right near the stadium one and I didn't want to forget.
Right, so. There, no, there it is. Funding for engineering study to assess and develop a restoration plan of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium. So we put restoration in there to.
Yeah, but that's not what's in the register. So what was submitted and is in the register says something different.
Is the other is the language from last year somehow? Yeah.
Yeah, it was the one that was lower down.
Yeah.
That I think you said,
I
oh,
deleted.
Delete that one. Let me just, I'll read what it says. It will make it simpler. Let me just find it.
No, I know what it says. It shouldn't
Okay.
have, that shouldn't be the one that went into the register. That was the one that was fiscal year 23 that then got edited for fiscal year 24, and it sounds like it just never got updated on whatever sheet got submitted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, renovation of Van Cortlandt Park Stadium, particularly restoration of its historic nature, repairs, leaks, and restrooms.
So do you want to add the particularly the historic language to this?
No, I'm just saying, because you were just debating which was the one, I'm just saying that the other one was the one that was
Was the
in the
one.
register. And it
Okay.
says, you know, it doesn't really matter because the answer is the same, get your council member to fund it.
Right, right. Now, I wanted to ask you about the Spuyten Duyvil Shorefront Park pond wall.
Okay, so that is,
Is this actually
Councilmember,
funded?
yeah, Councilmember Dinowitz did 3.5 million in capital funds for it. The scope meeting was in August. And it's really kind of, it was a rock retaining wall, which has now been silted in and sunk down.
Okay.
And I did talk to him and I said, you know, it's kind of not like really a retaining wall. It's a bunch of boulders that are below grade now. And you know, how flexible is it? And he was like, yeah, they'll figure it out. So,
Okay.
so yeah,
And-
so there's money for that. So that was very nice.
So then
That's very nice.
the Spuyten Duyvil Shorefront Park green infrastructure.
So that that's not in there. That was never submitted. So,
So this is not, we don't need this one.
because there was the debate between it about, is that parks, is that DEP? I mean, it's another one of these things it requires two agencies. And then it gets put into parks and they're like, oh no. So we still need that, because if they fix the pond wall, all of this stuff is going into the pond. So
one of my thoughts for the next meeting was to have the natural resources group come in and to talk to us about how they are part of this budget process. Because you know, if we wanted to, like, that, because it's also the Alderbrook stream bed, and frankly Van Cortlandt Lake, like there's restoration work that needs to happen with the wetlands in the park, and in several of our parks. And it seems like these budget requests get stuck between DEP and parks.
Right, so I did, just for closure ears, Joe, if you don't want to hear it, I did run this past Christy King. She's director of, they have like a long name, Forest, Horticulture, and Natural Resources.
Trees, birds, and coyotes.
Yeah. So, so I did run all the ones that I submitted, including Alderbrook, this green infrastructure, all that stuff to her. Her response is that, you know, it was pretty much like, we can't comment on the budget because we stick to what the commissioner says, but I don't have a problem with what you submitted, you know? Because I had also asked for additional vehicles and she was like, thank you, but that has been taken care of. So I don't think they're allowed to comment on budget priorities, but it might be great to have them talk about how they prioritize their current resources in regard to water and wetlands in our parks, because we've got Alderbrook. There's another stream. I don't think it has a name. It's on the I think 232nd Street and edge of Riverdale Park.
Yeah.
There's 1, 2, 3 ponds in Shorefront Park. I don't think Wallenberg has wetlands. I don't think Seton has wetlands. Van Cortlandt, of course. So that might be a great topic to just have natural resources talk to us about, is their, you know, what's their, you know, how do they prioritize and manage water resources in the park?
Right. I mean, because I don't need them to necessarily say yes or no, or, you know, advocate. I just would like to understand how to even phrase the budget request. And so that also we're not, you know, so that it's useful and it aligns with kind of how they are thinking about it. So that sounds like a good idea, just to have them come in and talk about how do they manage wetlands within, you know, how do they fund it? How do they plan for it? Is there a capital list? Like, I mean, it doesn't sound like a 3-year capital list thing, but maybe it is. Stephanie, you've got your hand up. Are you going to answer this question? You're gonna tell me what the answer is now?
I'm sorry. My, my head was up from before, just
Oh, okay.
about the vehicles. So vehicles.
I'm just,
they did-
I'm not, I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm like, now can you please just provide the answer? Now, I've tried to take my
Sure.
best guess.
No, my hand was just up from earlier about vehicles, and that's $50,000 for a single vehicle. And then
Right.
it can be considered capital.
One question while we're talking about vehicles is, charging infrastructure. That I assume is expense, or is it becomes capital if we ask for enough of it?
I think it depends on what needs to be done. It probably would be capital.
Because it seems like that there's a need, and maybe Joe can speak to this too. There's a need for charging infrastructure to actually properly electrify the parks fleet, and just public parking, and the 2 gas stations, even in Van Cortlandt Park, that there's an opportunity to help us get off of our dependence of fossil fuels. Yeah. Yes or
Yes.
Joe? Do you have any preferences for parks or areas in parks that, or equipment specifically that would need to be, like over by the DOT site, right, where there's some big equipment that's always parked around there? It would seem like a good place for some emphasis for like level 3 charging, like going nuts and having like real proper fast charging.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to, comment on this. I feel like this is something like the commissioner would want to give her input on. I mean, it's not a bad idea, right? I mean, it's great, but I think this is something the commissioner should probably, like, where things would be placed, or, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about displacement. I just mean as a budget priority that you should tell me what your budget priorities are, but this one seems like something that the Parks Department's going to need.
Sure.
I was like, I was thinking about.
Yeah, you could throw it in. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I know we're getting late, so let me just look at the last little bits here. We got to do we talked about PEP. We got our border access. ADA access to so it's like so Stephanie, the Northwest Forest, is that kind of that would be maybe expense? Seems like it could be small, but
What are
ADA
fence?
No, that's
Oh,
definitely that's capital. The ADA access to the Northwest Forest.
I think it's capital.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that people would like?
Is Washington's Walk on here?
Yes.
Okay.
Renovations to Washington's Walk.
Okay.
Benches, replacing temporary fence with wrought iron fence, and repair of adjacent sidewalk.
Because I saw it on the register, and I just didn't remember seeing it on there.
Well, also it's a little bit funny on the register because Fort Park is technically inside of Washington's Walk. So there's one that's like Washington's Walk parentheses Old Fort 4 that's been funded. That's $500,000 for the basketball courts in Fort 4. One, I was looking at the conditions and hazard reports from the inspections, and I just noticed that Hackett Park often has poor ratings. Does anybody have any? Hackett Park and Vinmont Veterans Park, which I think are right next to each other.
Yeah.
And one's kind of it's got that kind of historic dog run, or like the first dog run in the city or whatever, is on that hill.
Mhm. Hey, Deb.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to talk. So I actually brought that to the chief about the dog run, and we're going to try to do some in-house work on that dog run because it is in bad shape. And as far as the ratings, I mean, what we haven't really done poorly when it comes to Hackett and Vinmont. Vinmont and Hackett are usually pretty reliable when it comes to our internal ratings. We usually do pretty well. If, naturally there's times where, we won't get there till late and we'll get hit for litter, but we might get like a hanging limb that'll fail us over an active area sometimes, but for the most part, we do pretty well at those two properties.
Well, the Hackett Park one seems, I mean, I don't mean to take your bonus away or anything, like, you're doing a wonderful job.
Yeah, no, I didn't take it like that. I didn't take
No,
it.
but it just in terms of I didn't look to see when there was last a capital project, but I would guess it's probably been 20 years for Hackett Park.
Oh
Would you-
yeah, Hackett Park is it's old.
It's due.
Yeah.
It's just it's
Yeah.
like it's
Absolutely.
just,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, Deb, but some of those failed inspections for hazard things are exactly that, like tree limbs, and the smaller a park is and the more natural areas it has, it can easily fail. Like Spuyten Duyvil Shorefront Park was rated the worst park in New York City in the New Yorkers for Parks survey of parks.
That's mean. That's just mean. You should have mentioned that when he was on the
No,
call.
this was I did call them and I was like, oh, did it fail for impacted by this, and they're like, how do you know? You can't see what the survey is. And I said, I designed the survey in 1998, so
Right.
but that natural area kind of stuff makes things tricky because a branch over a sidewalk, people freak out about it and want it addressed immediately, and there's just not enough forestry resources to come today, right now, so
Yeah, no, I take it with a grain of salt because I know like it can be just a dead rat and then you failed your inspection. That's why I was like kind of just looking at a trend of it and what it was. And it seemed like with Hackett, I mean, also Hackett I've visited plenty of times. And so I kind of know already in my mind what it looks like. And that it's probably due. And I hate to have some of these little parks like get forgotten sometimes. So anything else? I know it's getting late, so if there's anything else we should put on the preliminary list just before we move on to new business? Okay, all right, we'll stop sharing.
and Deb, could I just for process,
Yes.
it seems like you're starting this much earlier than usual, so is that like I feel like we have more time to finalize these things?
Oh, we have plenty. Yeah, we have
them?
plenty of time. This is
Okay.
really there was a backlog because some of this just came from our conversations around the Northwest Forest. I knew there was some things we wanted to include. I knew that there were some people who had some things they wanted to include, and so I just wanted to open it up to start collecting the stuff. And then we also are one meeting short in the process because of the timing of when we meet and when our April meeting, whatever, I think April is when I need to get it to David, and we meet the day after the deadline. And so we end up getting kind of pushed back a month. So I wanted to just have a pretty solid list together going into next week or into next month. So
Okay, and I just wanted to thank you for, even though I'm here as much as I can, I wanted to thank you for intentionally reaching out to the groups that steward the parks to invite us to come.
oh, absolutely. I mean, the park stewards groups know best what the on the ground conditions are, and I just wish every one of our parks had at least one steward who was looking out for it because it
I'm
just
working
makes
on
all
it.
the difference. I know. Thank you. God bless you. It just makes such a difference, right?
Yeah, let's just hope I don't have to go back to work in March.
All right. So, is there any new business?
Maybe if no
All
one
right.
else has.
All right, Jody.
Okay, I did mention, so we have a new steward, a super steward in the natural area for Spuyten Duyvil Shorefront Park. I just recently completed trail maintenance corridor management with the Natural Areas Conservancy. So we're making a lot of progress in the park that has been neglected for a decade since I started working crazy. February, and you can email me at spitendivalny@gmail.com or tell Deb and she'll forward it to me. You're welcome to come to February 10th at Raoul Wallenberg Park. I won't say forest. There is a super steward is completing his plant ID training to get his permit to maintain Seton, the Seton-Wallenberg border. So you are welcome to walk along with that to see what it's like to do a super steward training. The next day, February 11th, the Natural Resources is again in Riverdale Park doing invasive removal. Their form is down right now with their website. February 19th, temporary.
Wait, what was the date for the invasive removal?
February 10th.
February 10th. Okay.
February 19th will be our second in the park after dark at Henry Hudson Park. We'll do a little 3:30 cleanup of the plaza, pulling leaves out from under the benches. We do that for the Parks Department. And then a little social from 5 to 6 o'clock. It was really well attended. People really appreciated coming out to enjoy the sunset and the park, not just doing the work. And I'll send flyers out. And then February 23rd is a Thursday, that's winter recess. Build On, a group that is they bring high schoolers to do community service and leadership training. They will be in Henry Hudson Park with me. Most of them live near Yankee Stadium. So we're debating on whether they can get to Henry Hudson Park or Shorefront Park. But so we'll have some high school students coming to our parks to learn what they could do to steward their parks in their own neighborhoods. So I'm cramming it all in case I gotta go back to work in March. So I'm hoping I can stay retired because this has been very fun. So that's the calendar that the Friends of Spuyten Duyvil is helping the other stewards groups put together.
Well, thank you so much, and good luck with retirement.
Yeah.
May it stick. Christina, do you want to talk about Bronx Park Speak Up?
Yes, and I'll talk about some Van Cortlandt Park Alliance events too. So Saturday, February 25th is the Bronx Park Speak Up. It's our 29th year. This year theme is all on greenways, but we'll also be talking about advocacy for parks in general too. So I hope everyone can come and join us for that. It'll be back in person at Lehman College, which is exciting. And for the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance, we have a bunch of volunteer days coming up. We're continuing our Forest Fridays through the winter. So in February, you can join our staff to work in the Northwest Woods of the park. And we also in March on the weekend, we have Saturday, March 12th, we have a wet meadow maintenance project that we're doing with New York City Audubon. And on March 4th, we're doing a race in the park as a fundraiser for the trails. So it's the Ultimate Trail Running Series. There'll be one in every borough. So we're the location for the Bronx, and it's a fundraiser for the park, and it's a 8K. You can either run it or you can walk it.
Is that it?
That's it. Yeah, sorry.
Wasn't sure. Okay. All right, cool. Well, it's great to see all kinds of activities happening, even though it's like the dead of winter. And then any other new business? All right, then. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Do I have a second? You guys don't want to leave, do you?
My first official act as a Parks Department, Parks Committee member. I second Rhonda's motion.
Excellent. You're officially on the record, Robert.
I just heard today.
All right, then. That is it. I adjourn the meeting. Have a great night, everybody. Good to see you.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
See you later.
See you later.
Bye.